the meeting for the Cameron Peak Fire under the command of Southwest Area Incident Management Team number 3. My name is Brandon Karen and I am a Public Information Officer on the team. Tonight we're going to go ahead and get started with our Incident Commander, Dave Gesser.
Hey, good evening, Incident Commander Dave Gesser with Southwest Area Team 3. We'll go through and we'll get an update on fire activity at this time and suppression efforts that have happened. But I really appreciate all the cooperation and coordination that's been going on with all the cooperating agencies involved in this fire. Currently we have about just over 1,000 personnel on this fire at this time. 9 pieces of rotary wing aircraft, which is helicopters, being large or small, along with our air attacks. That's a combination with that 1,000 people out there, a mixture of hotshot crews, hand crews, engines, heavy equipment, and things all working in this area on the fire. So with that, I'll turn it over to our operations section chief, Corey Carlson.
Good evening, everyone. Corey Carlson, Planning Operations Trainee for Southwest Team 3. So I'm going to give you a rundown on kind of what we've been doing the last 2 days. I've drawn some stuff on the map, and I'll kind of try to explain it if you guys can see it. But basically, I'll start here in Division Romeo Tango. This has been our priority area. This is where the fire made the big run a week ago, and we've put a lot of effort here. We've put over 200 firefighters just in this area alone. So, starting right in here, if you can see the purple, this is the area that we worked yesterday. So with hotshot crews, engines, we progressed along this line, hit the Pingree Park Road where it comes in from Highway 14, and then continued right on the fire's edge going direct. And when I talked about going direct, that's a combination of hand tools, hand crew work. Sometimes it could be dozers, other various types of heavy equipment, masticators. So when I refer to going direct, it's usually a variety of hand tools and then machinery. So that's what took place in here. Once we got in and around Pingree, we got to this Jack Sculch camp, which is a facility that we were using as a kind of a campsite for our firefighters. So this all occurred yesterday in Tango, and then this blue stuff is the stuff that we worked today. So from DP 375, we tied into some of the stuff from yesterday there, and then from here where we kind of hung it up at Jack Sculch camp, we continued to work this piece down and around. This piece from here down around to here is about 6 miles. So a lot of country to cover. I know it looks flat on the map. It's not. It's a lot of steep, nasty terrain, and there's a lot of, as some of you may know, there's a lot of beetle kill in here. There's a lot of hazards. So it's just slow. It's slow work, and it's very time consuming. So we were able to connect the dots in here, and that was pretty successful, and continued to work this area in and around Buckhorn and Upper Buckhorn, just kind of buttoning that up. So these lines on the map, I don't want anyone to confuse that with containment. It's by no means contained, but we're definitely making really good progress towards that. So I would say this stuff that's been worked here, I would say tomorrow we'll probably work that same piece again. We're going to have a change in winds tomorrow. We're going to have winds coming out of the north. So that's going to test some of the stuff that we've done here. And it's actually a really good thing, because that's exactly what we want to do is kind of test our lines, see how they're holding, and then we can continue to secure a little more. So that's Romeo and Tango. Like I said, we've worked all the way around this, the Pingree Park area, Buckhorn, and then kind of Upper Buckhorn area. So as we move west into uniform, some more really tough country. We've managed to connect all the dots from yesterday, today, and we've gotten to about here, just shy of Comanche Reservoir. So the goal tomorrow is to try to get just past Comanche Reservoir, and past that, it's going to be pretty challenging. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to put firefighters in this country. It's too steep. It's too much topography, and if we were to have an accident in there, there would be no way to get any folks out of there. We're not able to land helicopters, any of that stuff. So we're really going to, evaluate firefighter safety and, whether it makes sense for us to continue going west based on access. What that does mean is we're going to look at opportunities, to kind of put some control features, look for control features to keep anything from pushing out this way. There is options. There's not great options, but we'll continue to look at this stuff and see what we can do. So a lot of good work. I think if you've seen my Facebook thing this morning, I mentioned the fire perimeter on this fire is 237 miles, just to kind of put that in perspective. It's really easy to talk about closing the gap and doing this and that, but it's just really a long way around this thing, and it's a Rocky Mountains, so it's not flat ground, it's not easy country, and it's certainly time consuming. So that's what's happening in there. We were able to put some color on the map here. This is an area on the Long Draw Road that's been worked pretty good now. Not a lot of heat in there. Everything's looking pretty well. So we'll continue to work in these areas and continue to try to connect the dots and get around this thing where we can. As we come up around in the area that I call the thumb, we were able to access in off the Green Ridge Road, and then as soon as we accessed this, we started pushing east with a combination of hand crews and dozers. We were able to get to that point today, yesterday, get down this area using the same combination of crews and heavy equipment. This is a piece we did today, so we were able to connect the dots between this and this piece yesterday. So, this is probably the most complicated piece on this fire. It's even steeper and nastier than some of this other country, but there is some areas that a road access to kind of get in there and get people on the ground. So plan tomorrow is we'll continue working this piece around and as close to the fire's edge as possible. This stuff right here, that's heat. So this is fire out here. We worked Type 1 helicopters on this yesterday, again today. There's smoke coming up here, there's heat in there, and we continue to just kind of check that stuff up, try to put water on it to buy us some time so that we can continue working this way. Those Type 1 helicopters can hold anywhere from 750 gallons to 1,500 gallons of water per drop, and these guys have been working most of yesterday and all of today. So if that just kind of puts in perspective how much water we've been putting on this. And the water's great, but we still need to follow up with boots on the ground or heavy equipment to really get around this. So the goal is to get around this. If we're not able to, based on terrain, we do have a road system here that ties into this Kilpecker line that we continue to work. I've talked about this Kilpecker line for a while. I've said that we're almost done with it, and we are. It's just pretty challenging. So, the goal is that, if we can't get around this, then we'll come up on this road, get this Kilpecker line, and then try to find areas to lessen the footprint here as much as possible. Here in and around Kanickiwick, I hope I got that right, a lot of good work is being done in Kanickiwick along this Highway 14 corridor. These guys have been working nonstop even through the snow, mopping up, securing stuff in and around the structures around Highway 14. So I know there's a gap in here, and this is being worked heavily. So everything's looking really good. We are going to see some different winds, a different wind direction. We're going to see some warmer, drier temperatures coming in, so that's going to challenge us a little bit. But I think we're up to the challenge, and we're going to continue to focus in on areas of concern. We get infrared data, and And that infrared data enables us to put kind of a surge of resources into spots where they're showing heat, and we can go after that stuff. Things looking pretty good in Whiskey. Not a whole lot of activity. There's smoke in there, there's some heat in there, but it's really not wanting to move much. So that's good. This is still a very high priority to us, but not a lot of movement in here. Some smoke's popping up here and there, but we will be focusing in on this area as well. I mentioned Glacier View, Red Feather, Upper Buckhorn, Crystal Lakes. You know, most of the structure prep has been done on forest in and around these communities. Things are looking pretty good. We've worked on some contingency lines in here, and a contingency line is just a second line of defense. If something was to happen here, a secondary place for us to pick that up prior to us having to engage in full-on structure protection with sprinklers, pumps, you know, all kinds of stuff. So with that, I'll move down into the Rocky Mountain National Park area. So we did have a good meeting today with a lot of people down in Rocky Mountain National Park, Estes Park, Glen Haven, some fire chiefs, some local officials, park superintendent, and a lot of good stuff happened. So we did come up with a plan of some proposed line that would tie in from some of this direct stuff that we've done, and basically work down, kind of take Glen Haven, the retreat, Storm Mountain out of place, Cedar Park, down and around McGraw Ranch, and then tie it in on the backside of Estes Park. So that's a proposed plan. We discussed it at length today. We discussed time frames, equipment, firefighter safety, and we think we have a good plan there. So that would eliminate anything potentially coming out of here from going anywhere east. So kind of a long update. I apologize, but I hope the level of detail that we're explaining will help answer some of these questions that you may have. So with that, end of report. Thank you.
All right, everyone. It sounds like some people are having really good sound quality on their end. It's coming through fine on our end, but at the same time, a couple of you are having some difficulties getting that sound. So stand by for just a minute. We're going to plug in a different mic, and we'll see if that helps y'all out. All right, so we just plugged a different mic in there. We're just going to give it a minute. If you guys could just pop into the comments, let us know if this is better or worse. It's going to be a little bit of a delay before you're hearing me say this, but go ahead and pop that in there. And we'll just keep an ear out on our side as well. And hopefully if this helps, and then we'll get started into our Q&A portion of the evening. So, thanks for bearing with us, guys. You know how it is sometimes, but we'll work through this. All right, so it looks like everybody's having some better sound, so we're going to go ahead and keep this microphone in. So with that being said, let's get started with our Q&A with our Incident Commander Operations. And then just so you guys know, we also have the Larimer County Sheriff here with us, as well as the U.S. Forest Service. So if you didn't send a question in earlier, you still have that opportunity. Please drop those down in the comment section, and we'll get started. So we're going to start with our Incident Commander, Dave Gesser. A few of us were wondering about why they changed the Incident Command every few weeks. Is it so everyone gets a rest?
Yeah, so it is. You know, the teams are designed, and even our firefighters, that we roll out on a 14-day assignment. We can have that extension up to 21 days, and you saw that with the black team that was in here. They extended out in there, but it is to get that rest. It's a lot of work that goes into, even with the incident management teams, really working long hours and building those plans and working through to get folks going.
All All right, next question is, if you do reach containment on the west edge, would there be an opportunity to open 14 as it heads west toward Gold from that section?
Yeah, so as we get that containment in there and really look at the roads and making sure that we've taken care of all the snags, any hazards associated with that, we would work with the Laramie County Sheriffs to be able to open that road back up once we felt it was secure, and they did as well.
All right, next question. Will a bear team be formed for the Cameron Peak fire? If so, when will they arrive on scene?
Yeah, so that's been in the works already. So the bear team will be arriving on the 21st, 9/21. They'll be arriving here and being escorted out into some of the more critical areas that if we still have any heat and stuff in there, but they will be coming and assessing the area.
All right, next question. What has become of the wildlife in the burn area? How long before the area will be habitable for them again?
So yeah, a lot of the wildlife, when a fire comes through, do get out of the area. But then a lot of the times you'll see wildlife back in that area the day after. A lot of the wildlife do like to feed on some of the soot that's out there. It's got the nutrients in there. And then the plant growth, depending on the burn severity, will start to grow back within about a week's time. But you will start to see deer and elk and other things in those areas now feeding on some of that nutrients that the ash that's left behind.
Okay, next one's a little bit longer. So 2 parts. First part is, are wildfire operations any different on Forest Service, private properties, wilderness areas, and Rocky Mountain National Park? And the second portion is, are they being treated, or are we fighting the fire basically the same? Or are the areas in the park being treated differently since it's a national park?
So wildfires, whether it's Forest Service land, BLM land, state land, private land, is all treated the same. Different responses, a lot of it's coordinated responses as well with the cooperators, especially on your private and state land, so we all do fight fire the same. As far as the Rocky Mountain National Park, and even within the Forest Service and other agencies, you have what's known as wilderness areas. And those wilderness areas do have a little bit of treatment that's a little different with them, and most of that is just the approval process to be able to utilize either mechanized equipment, landing helicopters within the wilderness, because those are designated areas for wildlife and for the habitat and things that are out there. So, right now, all it is, it's an approval process within the park. And right now, we have that approval process to be able to do that. But within the Rocky Mountain National Park, you know a lot of the area, it's steep, rugged country. So we really take that into consideration, whether it's a park or whether it's a forest. You have to take in that firefighter safety and what is that risk to those firefighters.
All right, we'll do one more for you. Can you talk about what constitutes containment?
Yeah, so with containment, basically what it is Corey talked a little bit, we have some containment here, and it's black. So what that is they've really worked that area, mopped it up, gone in either a chain in, which a chain is 66 feet from the black edge into the interior. But they really worked that area pretty hard, ensuring that there's no heat left in that area before they call that area contained.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, we'll have Operations Corey Carlson. So we've had a couple different questions in regards to containment lines being built. So this person is curious as to the width of the containment lines on Manhattan and Kilpecker, and the degree of confidence they will hold, especially if there are winds.
Yeah, so for the Kilpecker line, that we call it, it's a mixture of hand line and dozer line. Hand line can be anywhere from 3 feet wide to 6 feet wide. It depends on the fuels on the ground. There's a lot of dead and down in this forest. A lot of that's because of the beetle kill, and that just logs stack on top of logs. So we got to clear all that stuff out, and then once we do, we gotta dig down to mineral soil, and we got to dig down to dirt, stuff that won't burn, and some of that stuff can be pretty deep. So the kill pecker line is 3 feet, 6 feet wide with hand line in places, and then we have dozers in there, and depending on the type of dozer, it could be 12 feet wide. There's areas where it could be 25 feet wide. You could make it as wide as you want. Usually what happens and what happens on the kill pecker line is it's not always flat, it's not always ridge top. Sometimes it's mid-slope line, which a lot of that equipment can't operate on mid-slope line because it'll roll. So it definitely have to have the right kind of conditions to be able to put in that kind of line. But there's a mix of hand line, there's a mix of dozer line, and there's a variety of width depending on where we could work and where we couldn't. As far as the winds, we're going to get north winds tomorrow. That'll give us a little more time to work some of this area. But all our lines are going to be tested by the winds. They always are. That's one of our biggest things that we have to worry about is not only wind speed but wind direction. All it takes is an ember, and that's why we have a ton of people in here, and they're watching. They're keeping eyes in the green. That's the unburned area, and we have people right there ready.
All right, next question. Can you provide more detail about what it means to go direct on the active fire lines? Does this mean they're going in with chainsaws, shovels, hoses, dozers, etc.?
Yep, so direct fire line is when we go right on the fire's edge. Basically, we have 1 foot in the black and 1 foot in the green, and we're going as close to the black edge as we can. And that's just to eliminate, just to stay right on the fire's edge. And we do that with, a variety of tools. Shovels, Pulaskis, which is kind of a modified axe, a variety of different hand tools. We use chainsaws to cut stuff up that's laying in the way. And we use masticators, dozers, whatever makes sense, whatever we can operate in that area. And it's just going right on the fire line. Indirect is when we can't get right on the fire's edge, maybe because of topography or fuels, we're just not able to get right on the fire's edge. And when we do that, we have to go out a little bit. Here's a piece of indirect road right here. We could use this potentially and then burn this piece out and create a bigger buffer between our control feature and the fire. Part of the reason we're not doing a lot of indirect on this fire is because of the amount of dead and down, bug kill, and just the dry fuel conditions. It's really hard to put fire in the ground in these kind of conditions because if we get a spot over there, it could be really challenging. So.
All right, and you talked about this a little bit, but can you give a little bit better idea in order for folks to visualize what a typical day is like for these hardworking crews on the fire lines as they're trying to put out hot spots?
So a typical day for these guys is they're camped out here, and they've been camped out here for several weeks, and their day starts probably at 5:30 in the morning and it goes to probably 10 at night, and they're doing all the stuff I talked about earlier. They're just going direct. They're hot. They're mopping up, and that's basically making sure there's no heat or smoke. And they're out there working, and they're out there long hours. And then they go back to their camp where they're fed, and they go to bed at night. So, and they repeat that for 2 weeks, like Dave said, and then typically they'll go home and be replaced with another module of the same type if needed.
All right, this one's a little bit longer. So regarding the Highway 14 corridor, which is the biggest threat to the Glacier View area at this point in time, it seems, the Highway 14 fire line hasn't moved in almost a week now. What will it take to consider the Highway 14 fire line contained? as well as the northeast line that is adjacent to the High Park fire burn at the north end of Pingree Park Road.
So here's the Highway 14 corridor right here. Here's where we jumped off the 14 corridor and started picking up this fire direct, kind of along the Pingree Park Road, and then where it slopped over the Pingree Park Road. All this 14 corridor is looking really, really good. This is looking really good. Not much heat. In fact, this piece here and around here is basically almost showing no heat. Infrared is not showing anything there, and it's because of all the work these guys are doing out here. Anything that shows up, they extinguish it. It takes time, but the 14 corridor and this northeast corner and on around in Tango here is looking really good, looking really secure. And hopefully, if we can get through some of this wind that's coming from a different direction, and it tests our lines, and we can get through some low RH days and some, different wind directions, we may be able to call this piece, contained sometime in the near future, I would say.
Next question. What is the status of the fire on the southeast portion of the Thumb? Is it likely to move down the north side of Highway 14?
So this is my biggest area of concern right here. Exactly what you're talking about. So, tomorrow we're gonna get back up with the heavy helicopters. We're gonna drop water on the heat in here, and we're gonna continue to push dozer line east around this, as well as using crews, and continue this Killpecker line. Like I said, a massive amount of work has been done in this 14 corridor. There's structures in there. They've worked this area. They have structure prep in there. They have a lot of resources in there. So I feel pretty confident that we should be fairly successful, or be successful in here. But yeah, we're going to be tested by the wind, and we have a bulk of our manpower kind of focused in there, and we'll refocus more folks in there tomorrow.
Next question is, are fire crews doing mitigation on private property in the Red Feather Lakes, Crystal Lakes, Glacier View, Glen Haven, or Estes Park areas?
So currently, there's no work that I'm aware of that's being done on private land in the Glen Haven, Storm Mountain, Cedar Park areas. There's some proposed stuff that may make it a little bit easier, but we've been working with the Larimore County Sheriff's Office, and I think he's been working with some private landowners and coming up with, proposed actions there, and then just, seeing if that works for everyone. So it is possible that there could be work that's done on private land, but as far as I know down here, everything's just proposed, nothing's been implemented. Up here, pretty much we've stayed on forest around Crystal Lakes, Red Feather, and Glacier View. There may be folks working in and around that area doing structure assessments on private property, but most of the work occurred around the subdivisions and not in them. Now, if for some reason this fire was going to move towards these communities, we would go in there and probably do some mitigation work based on the assessments that we've completed.
Next question is, are we able to get some flyover video at some point so that we can see what it looks like back there?
Yes, I would say it's possible. We do have some UAS drones that flew this Comanche Reservoir area yesterday, and that was just to get eyes on some of this stuff and give us an idea of where some of the smoke is. We also do some helicopter recons to fly the edge, and once in a while we get some video of that. So it's not my, I'm not the one that would allow that or takes that video, so we could probably answer that question in the chat when I know for sure.
All right, one more question, couple parts to that, Corey, is what is AirOps doing, and are they dropping water or retardant? The second part is, what was the primary mission for AirOps today?
Yeah, so the primary mission for AirOps today was working this area right here at the Thumb. That was pretty exclusive use of the heavy helicopters. I do believe they did some stuff down low near Chapin Creek. There was some smoke coming up in there yesterday, very little smoke, but I do believe they put some water down in this whiskey area. I'm not 100% positive whereabouts, but there was some water drops there. Additionally, air ops, there were some recons that went on today, looking at fire behavior, some of these division supervisors and branch directors looking at some of the bigger picture stuff. And then we also have what we call air tactical group supervisors, and they fly in a fixed wing plane, at 12,000 feet, whatever, and they just do laps around the fire, looking for anything, kind of a 30,000, foot view of the area and the fire perimeter, making sure there's nothing that we haven't missed out there or something, just eyes in the sky, basically. So that was pretty much the extent of air ops.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
So next we'll bring up the Larimer County Sheriff.
Good evening, Sheriff Smith. And actually, before we start into questions, I'd like to take a little liberty and maybe give you an overview of where we're at as we deal with residents and evacuations and repopulating folks. Obviously, we completed the damage assessments at the end of last week, and that's when you got the numbers of 54 total structures damaged or destroyed. And of those, 25 were actually destroyed homes. There's been a number of outbuildings, and folks that have been around these areas recognize that from time to time we come across structures that were never listed on the county's assessment site. So we still go out and shore some of those things up, but we've been able to get through that. Of all those destroyed structures, only 2 were in the Poudre Canyon, and those are along the Norman Fry Bridge Road, just in the middle of Rustic, just past where Archer's is at. The remainder of them were down in, what I'm referring to as Monument Gulch, but it's kind of a whole area down through here. I don't have that list, but they generally cover this front area of the fire that came out. And in doing that, we've been able to reach out and contact every property owner who had damaged or destroyed property. So once we got those assessments done, our next priority was working to get that information and more to the property owners. So over the weekend, it took a lot of work to get anybody up into the area, that Monument Gulch area, because the firefighters were finding not only a lot of down trees, but as they cut them to remove them and create even a small road we could get ATVs or UTVs across, they were finding trees continuing to fall. So that was ongoing through the weekend. We were able to get, of the Monument Gulch area, we got with the Homeowners Association, and we couldn't bring everybody in, so they selected 4 different residents to represent the neighbors, to go in, to view the area, to get some pictures, etc. So we've been able to do that. We're not close enough to being able to open it for 2 reasons. One is they are still dealing with the falling trees, no electricity, no way to communicate up there. But more importantly, as Corey was talking about, with this active fire in the area, this is a zone that still has the potential for activity. So we're not to the level of repopulating that area, but we are working to not only make sure residents can see their homes, but we know that they'll be working with insurance adjusters, etc. So we're working to make that happen as soon as possible. I believe by tomorrow we're going to be able to get folks up that haven't been on that Norman Fry area up to see those properties and be able to do the same. A couple of good pieces of news I'd like to share before we take the questions. One is because of the conditions in here, with all the work the firefighters have done, we're getting a chance to see now that the snow's melted off or melting off, how the fires reacted. The team was comfortable removing, as of tomorrow at 7 a.m., we'll be removing the voluntary evacuations all through the Glacier View Meadows area. So 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, we anticipate, without something unexpected happening, that area is totally being lifted. We do still have Highway 14 at Stove Prairie up to the fish hatchery, and tomorrow we anticipate being able to move that from a mandatory evacuation to a voluntary. And again, that's going to be noon or maybe a little after, so we'll be able to get folks back up there who have properties. And with that, because we don't have active fire running on us, I will be working with you if you have contractors you need to get up, things that need to be done, we understand that, and certainly the folks that need to get adjusters up there on Norm Fry in that area will be working on that. So that's some of the complexities that we're dealing with. And the other I'll just mention is, obviously we still have the concerns in Crystal and Red Feather. We're dealing with Glacier View. And certainly we work on a daily basis talking to the team about getting Highway 14 open back up. And I think one of the questions hit it directly. Obviously they need to make sure that west side is safe, but we also need to make sure there's not trees falling on Highway 14, a direct threat of issues on the road, etc., or firefighters actively working that area. I don't believe that's the case now, but hopefully in the coming days we'll have a better answer on that. At this point, for folks that need to get all the way across, obviously going up to Laramie continues to be the best option. And then the last thing I just want to mention before we go into questions is that issue of Estes Park in Glen Haven. And we were involved in the same meetings with the incident management team today up there, working with town officials, fire district, working with Darla, her crew up in the park, and working across all the contingency plans if that fire happened to move and place a threat on Estes, how we might conduct evacuations there, how we would make notifications. And obviously Estes is a unique area because there's a lot of folks, a lot of visitors and guests up there who wouldn't be connected to the Everbridge notification system. So the plan there would be to use the system referred to as IPAWS. IPAWS is the system that's used when you get a weather alert, when you get some kind of a silver alert, amber alerts, etc. And those can hit every phone coming off of a tower. Obviously with Estes Park being fairly isolated, they're working off just a handful of phone towers. So we're working, if that were the case, how that would happen, how we would have command post operations up there, how we would all be integrated. With that said, do I see anything that creates an immediate or imminent concern for the sheriff's office and local officials on evacuations in Estes Park? No, I don't see that now. However, as was mentioned, when the weather changes, we're going to see this fire tested. So we don't want people to lull, but we do want them to think about the fact that we're actually not too bad a shape. And I know one of the questions that had come up before was Glen Haven. We're not seeing with the work that's being done and the change in fire and weather conditions at this point in time, any moves to go back into a mandatory evacuation in the Glen Haven area. We're not seeing it, but we know the potential is still there. So hopefully that addresses some of the questions and gives an overview before we step forward.
All right, thank you for that great explanation of what's been going on. We're still seeing a couple comments come into the chat about specific evacuations. I know you mentioned that things are possibly changing tomorrow, but could you just give us another quick overlook of those different evacuations that we're currently seeing?
So when you look at the evacuations that are out there, we still have the voluntary for Crystal and Red Feather, and that again is because of the fire behavior here. We don't see it as imminent. We haven't put it as a mandatory, but we want to see what happens with the fire managers when this fire gets tested a little bit. So that one's still in place. Glacier View is being dropped. Highway 14 is going to go from mandatory at Stove Prairie up to voluntary from Stove Prairie up to the fish hatchery, so get folks back in there. And then if you go back down, Buckhorn and 44H, that one is staying in place for the near future. And that's, I think, pretty obvious when you look at where that fire behavior, they've done tremendous work out in this area. That's not been tested. And an eastward push like we had a week ago, we recognize how dangerous that can be and how quickly. So that one's going to take a little bit longer. I think we've lifted everything else over here to the east, I believe. And if you get down to the Glen Haven area, we still have those as voluntaries for folks. But at this point, you're certainly free to go back to your property. We just want to make sure folks know that one isn't completely out yet. If you want the very specifics, because these things have changed so much, I may not be exact on every one of those. Go to larimer.org, click in the upper left-hand corner, and you'll see the links to Cameron Peak Fire. And there will actually be areas that will break that down. And you can go to NOCO Alert, and it will show you what's active at any given time. And you can make sure you're notified when those change.
Next question is going to be, what is the likelihood that Glen Haven would go into mandatory evacuations?
And I think we've answered that in the earlier, so I think
Yep,
we're good there.
you're good there. Just checking. We're having a lot of folks ask about getting access for contractors to go into the different areas to work on their homes for a variety of reasons, delivering different materials, starting to get their homes ready for the winter. What does that look like?
That's an excellent question. As we're getting mandatory zones, obviously, nobody's going into those areas right now, but those are very minimal. Mainly we're on 44H or the Buckhorn. Anywhere that's voluntary, based on current fire behavior, it's a very good chance of being able to get some general contractors in to winterize homes, take care of some issues like that, and obviously for homeowners themselves to get back in. With that said, if fire behavior were to pick up in the next few days and we were to see an area tested, and if we had a real push on Clear Canyon, or if we had a push down this direction, we may revisit that. And sometimes that's more in the late afternoon when fire behavior is most active. So I encourage folks when they look to do things like that, if at all possible, to get with us early in the day and pose those questions, see if they can get out early before fire tends to pick up.
Next question is it possible to have more security on Storm Mountain? Folks are concerned that if evacuation levels increase, they're worried about people getting in and accessing their property while they're gone.
Great question. I understand that. Certainly, as a former Storm Mountain resident, I know the community. I know there has been some challenges with some folks. There's a lot of different ways they can get back in there. And so if we were to move to mandatory, certainly that's when we set up more roadblocks, and we combine that with roving patrols when it can safely be done, because we recognize when we have a mandatory evacuation that your property's left there without your ability to protect it. So if we were to end up there in those areas we have that, we do more roving patrols. When it's a voluntary evacuation, not as much.
If someone is in a mandatory evacuation area and they want to leave only to get supplies and groceries, will they be allowed back into their home?
Once we've gone to mandatory evacuation, we're not letting folks typically back into those areas because it went mandatory. And as we've talked about before, we don't physically remove people from their property. We give them that evacuation. And again, we're really at this point looking at the area on the Buckhorn. And again, it's a very active area. So once we've moved folks out, we've got those checkpoints pretty much locked down.
We have one community member asking, they have property in the Red Feather area and they actually have family members coming into the area. What can they do to into their property through that roadblock?
What I would encourage you to do, again, there's phone numbers. At this point, calling our dispatch center is actually probably fairly reasonable. Typically, when it's real busy, we ask you to avoid that. But you can call our dispatch center, 416-1985, and explain the situation. Typically, in those instances, we can make that happen. We just need to know who those folks are, since they won't have anything that ties into the area. But most of the time, we can make that happen.
All right, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and move on over to our Forest Service representative, Katie Donahue. All right, first question is gonna be, how will this impact future flooding and where, or do we even know that yet?
So, especially for those of you who were here during Hyde Park and then in the big floods in 2013, you know that fires can have a significant impact on how water moves through the landscape. However, we don't have exact answers to those questions yet. The BEAR team that Dave talked about earlier that's going to be coming, and some initial assessments that are already being done, will help us answer where we should be worried and start looking at some possible treatments we can do to address some of those hydrological issues. But I don't have firm answers to those questions yet. Of course, it also depends on the weather, and if we have a lot of precipitation, the impacts of the fire may show up more than if we have a dry year following the fire.
Next question is in regards to the closures. So 2 parts to this. Why is the Forest Service closure so far north? And second part is, when will you reduce the closure size?
Sure. I will start with the second half of the question and move backwards. So we've had this question pretty much every virtual Q&A, and I definitely understand, especially as we're moving into different hunting seasons, how frustrated folks are that they can't get outside, because we have closed a very large area. However, it's all about safety. And that safety may be about getting close to a place where there's active fire and people should not be in terms of the immediate risk from the fire line. Or it may be about where crews are working, and there's a lot of heavy equipment and firefighters and crews going up and down those roads, and we want to make sure that the area is clear and available for them. And then the kind of the other piece is the size and the expansion of the closure that we had when we had the big runs last weekend. And so, yeah, it goes up pretty far north of the fire, and then we've also expanded down here to the southeast. Some of the reasons for that are about the interconnectivity of roads, and I think I've talked about this as well on a lot of these Q&A sessions. There are lots and lots of ways into and through the forest in this area, and so it is very possible for folks, whether they're traveling in a vehicle or on a motorcycle or an ATV, to get themselves into a situation that they shouldn't be in simply by moving from trail to trail or road to road. So what we tried to do when we designed the closure area is keep it understandable and also keep it in a place where we can actually stop some of those accidental access points. And when the closure is smaller, there's a lot more places that folks can get in. So we will be looking at the size of the closure depending on what happens with the fire. And as some of these places where they've been doing a lot of work, if they do start to feel secure, we may shrink the closures, but we're not going to do that until it's safe to do so.
All right, next question is, could you speak to why there is not more preventative fire mitigation, such as allowing timber or firewood cells to remove the dead and dying trees before they become kindling for these massive and unfightable wildfires?
Sure. So I know that it doesn't feel that way right now because of the current footprint of this fire, but there actually are a lot of fuels treatments on this landscape. Where the fire made its big run is actually mostly wilderness, and that's an area that under law we can't do a lot of treatments, but we have lots and lots of other treatments in the area, and we're actually building a strategy with lots of other landowners. For example, a lot of landowners up in the Red Feather area have been working with us to build landscape scale treatments. So we have a couple of tools in our toolbox for that. We do thinning and pile burning, and a lot of you who live in the area know that we burn a lot of piles in the winter. We also do broadcast burning. For those who live up around Red Feather and Crystal Lakes, you've been involved in a lot of those projects that we've done over the last few years. I think firewood sales was also raised online earlier. That is a fuels reduction. However, folks usually don't take more than 2 or 3 trees at a time when they collect firewood, so it doesn't, given the vast number of trees that were affected in an incident like this, fuel wood treatments tend to be less impactful. And then we do have a number of timber sales. We have active contracts that are in the fire area right now, and we also have a number of them that are planned.
All right, thank you. That'll cover us for tonight. All right, we have one more question for our incident commander. What can we expect for the next 7 to 10 days?
Okay, so for the next 7 to 10 days, really the focus, on what Corey had talked about was really securing this line that they have worked really well, continuing to have folks in there mopping up, working up on what we're calling the thumb, getting this area really secured and tied in, and then also continuing this work down here in the lower edge as far as they can get. A lot of this country goes into mid-slope and steep, rugged terrain, so the folks will work as far as they can in there. You'll continue to see the helicopter use and things in there as well. As I said earlier, we had a total of 9 rotor wing aircraft, and that's helicopters, and all 9 of those were working today. As Corey mentioned, there were several of them working up here, utilizing this retardant base that we have set up here, putting retardant in here as well. along with a few of the medium helicopters work in this country as well. So you'll continue to see that. You'll start to probably more than likely see some containment on the map, which will be increasing that percentage. Currently we're sitting at 4%, but as we add that containment, that'll start to go up. So one of the other things before we do close out for the evening, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the TFR, which is the temporary flight restrictions. I know you don't see it on the map, but it's a big box that's out here that's covering that area, which is, like I said, a temporary flight restriction. Yesterday we did have what we call a drone intrusion, and that came out of the retreat. So when those drones do intrude upon, and we spot them within our TFR, that basically shuts down all aircraft. So we ask, please do not fly those drones within that area, because what that does then is that hampers our efforts with our aircraft to be able to fly in that same space. So please avoid using any drones within that area. I want to say thanks for joining us tonight. We'll do this again on Wednesday. If you continue to have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll have folks try to respond to those questions and get those answered for you. Thank you.